As we leap into a new year and a new decade, there are obviously some things that we wish for along the way. We don't know a lot about what the next 12 months will be like for the Nintendo Switch, and there are so many different directions that they could take the console in. But one thing's for certain. There will be some surprises, some low points, and some high points along the way. I'm so ready for the ride, and today I'm going to be talking about 10 of my biggest hopes for the console next year. I tried to make these hopes for this video not too unrealistic. I do think that each of these 10 things could potentially happen for next year, and that's why they were included on the list. I'm not going to be including things like I hope Breath of the Wild 2 releases next year, which obviously I do hope for that, but if that's going to be rushing the game and make the quality worse, that's not really something that I would want to hope for. I'd like for the game to release when it's ready to release, so stuff like that won't be on this list. With that being said though, I strongly encourage you to leave your 10 biggest hopes for the Nintendo Switch in 2020 in the comment section down below. And before we get started, I just wanted to say thank you so much for 20,000 subscribers. Just before we hit 2020, we reached the 20,000 mark, which is pretty interesting to me. I love how there's so many of you guys who love talking about Nintendo as much as I do, and I hope to continue to improve the quality of the content for next year, and I have a ton of things planned that I really think that you're going to enjoy. With that all being said though, let's get right into the list. Coming in at the number 10 spot on my list for the 10 biggest hopes is that some smaller series without announced new titles coming to the Switch finally get one. There are a ton of series that I'm just gonna lump into this one entry here because they're all in the same boat to me. Series like WarioWare, Rhythm Heaven, Kid Icarus, many more are series that are smaller in terms of the number of fans that they have, but combined together there's a lot of people who really enjoyed this collection of titles. They're all in a similar boat because they don't currently have a title on the Switch from their series, or they don't have a title announced for their series coming to the Switch. There are a ton of people who would enjoy a new WarioWare game, but there hasn't been one released on the console so far. And for fans of the series, I really hope that a new entry comes out for them because it's going to be something that they enjoy. The first two examples that I gave, WarioWare and Rhythm Heaven, will probably be lower cost titles. They won't be the full retail price. But Kid Icarus is also a series that's relatively smaller sales-wise, but could definitely blossom into something a lot larger with a new entry on the Switch. So that could also be another good reason to put a new Kid Icarus game on the Nintendo Switch. It's a series that I could definitely see blossoming and becoming one of Nintendo's biggest, with a new control scheme fixing one of people's biggest issues about the game and an improved graphical sense to make you feel more immersed into that world. If some great modernizations and changes are made to these smaller series, they could definitely grow and become something bigger, but that'll only happen once they're given a chance on the Nintendo Switch. And that's something I'd really like for these series. Coming in at the number 9 spot on this list is a high quality of gameplay from Animal Crossing New Horizons. There's a certain reason why I'm signaling out this title specifically for why I believe it needs to have a very high quality, and this is because of its delay. Now, as I even mentioned earlier on in this video in the intro, I'm definitely somebody who supports delays for games if they result in a higher quality of the title. Now, a high quality Animal Crossing title is something that we get very frequently. There are very few Animal Crossing titles that are main entries in the series that have released and fans have passed them aside and the quality hasn't been very good. That's not very frequent to happen. And with Animal Crossing becoming one of Nintendo's biggest series at the moment, I definitely believe they're going to pour their heart and soul into this game and make it one of the highest quality titles we've ever seen from the series. This isn't something that I'm very worried about, hence why it's lower down on the list, but this is something that I definitely would like to see, because Animal Crossing fans have been waiting a long time for a new main entry in the series, newly released in 2013. This is going to be 7 years that fans are waiting for a new mainline entry in the series. They've got a delay happening to this game, which pushed the release of this game back even further than it was supposed to be. And if this is all said and done and the title releases and people aren't happy with it because of the low quality of the title, then all this waiting will be for nothing. But if the delay ends up being justified with a very high quality Animal Crossing title, then it's going to be all worth it. This wait is going to be worth it for the Animal Crossing title that fans have been dreaming of for a long time. Coming in at the number 8 spot on this list is consistent releases throughout the year. Now, considering that we're already in January and we don't really have much information about a game coming out in January that's a major first-party title, I'm not really sure if this is going to be fulfilled. But Nintendo could definitely do this throughout the year and make up for a low amount of releases in January. I've talked about this issue before on the channel, and it's that Nintendo mainly backlogs their titles into the holiday season nowadays. And that's fine, I understand why you would want to have more games released in the holiday season, but sometimes you'll go 1 or 2 months without a new major first-party title releasing, and then they'll be cluttered amongst themselves in 1 month. and that doesn't really make too much sense to me. I'd really like it for Nintendo to spread out the releases throughout the year and make releases by month more consistent. I'm even fine if you backlog the holiday season a little bit and not provide as many titles for fans to play in January. That's more understandable for me from a money perspective, but I definitely think it would be more beneficial for Nintendo to release more titles consistently throughout the months. Instead of releasing 2 titles in April, put one out in March and then one in April. Stuff like that hasn't really happened too much for the Nintendo Switch, and the releases have been relatively cluttered with some inconsistency. So some consistency throughout the releases I don't really think will improve and streamline the release schedule for the Nintendo Switch, but it may also correlate to higher sales for games on the Switch, considering that there's going to be more space and more breathing time for people to consider purchasing one game in one month and then another game in the next month, as opposed to 2 coming out in 1 month and they only want to purchase 1 game. Coming in at the number 7 spot on this list are new Mario sports games, particularly from the Mario Sluggers and Mario Strikers series. We've gotten 1 Mario sports game on the Nintendo Switch so far, this being Mario Tennis Aces, and this game was fun. It was a nice way to present the Mario Tennis series, and I definitely think this is what Ultra Smash was supposed to be, but it was rushed out on the Wii U, and this was definitely the definitive edition released on the Switch. However, Mario Tennis is not one of my favorite Mario sports series, and my 2 favorite genres of Mario sports games are definitely Sluggers, the Mario Baseball series, and Strikers, the Mario Soccer series. And there's specific reasons for why I like each of these titles and prefer their series over one another. They're both very high quality games. Sluggers I enjoy because I believe there's a lot more to dig into there. There's a ton of characters, a ton of customization that you could do, and a ton of different modes that you could play through. Strikers I really like for the fun arcade-based gameplay and the unique aesthetic that it brings. It's a lot more intense looking of a Mario game as opposed to most other sub-Mario series that are out there. There's very specific reasons to appreciate both subgenres of Mario sports games, and I'd really like to see at least one of them released next year. I do believe there's a decent chance of this happening, considering that there's been 2 years since we got the last Mario sports game, being Mario Tennis Aces, as I previously mentioned. We could also end up getting a Mario Golf game or another game like Mario Sports Superstars, which dumbs down all of the sports for the sake of releasing them as a compilation, which I don't really appreciate as much. I like Mario sports titles focused on one specific sport to really flesh it out and provide a ton of modes for you to play with within that one sport. And if a new Mario Baseball game or a new Mario Strikers game releases next year, that'll be very enjoyable. Coming in at the number 6 spot on this list is a remaster of the Metroid Prime Trilogy. With Metroid Prime 4's early announcement last year of being delayed because it was restarting development, that means that Metroid Prime 4 is probably not releasing this year, and instead is going to be releasing later on. But to compensate for that and give Metroid Prime fans something to play while they wait for that new title, why don't you release the Metroid Prime Trilogy? Considering how long it's been since the last main release of a Metroid Prime game, and you're expecting a ton of people to go and buy Metroid Prime 4, a lot of the fan base may have been lost. A lot of people may have left the Metroid Prime series, or there's many people who didn't play the original Metroid Prime Trilogy that are looking into Metroid Prime 4 and don't really know what it's about. To compensate for this, I think it would be a really good idea to release the original Metroid Prime Trilogy to allow people who aren't as versed into the series to get into it by playing the original 3 games that many people adore. A full price tag for 3 games is definitely a lot more absorbable for some people, and there's going to be many people who purchase the Metroid Prime Trilogy if you were to remaster it in HD, potentially add some new features to it. And because of that, it's going to be a great way to expose people to the Metroid series before you want to go and get them to buy the brand new main entry of the series they spend a ton of money and resources into the development of. I believe that Nintendo releasing a Metroid Prime Trilogy will be a great thing for the series and would allow people to experience Metroid that haven't experienced it before. Coming in at the number 5 spot on this list is for Pikmin 4 to finally release. Back in 2015, Shigeru Miyamoto confirmed that Pikmin 4 was in development and was, quote, almost done. A couple years after, we got the release of Hey Pikmin, which is clearly a spin-off for the Pikmin series and not Pikmin 4. So where is Pikmin 4? This could be a situation like Metroid Prime 4, where development was restarted midway through, and that's potentially the reason for the delay. I see no other reason why Pikmin 4 would have been delayed like this. The announcement from Miyamoto was made during the Wii U's life cycle, so fine, maybe they were saving it for the Nintendo Switch. Then it would make sense for a 2017 or even 2018 at the latest release. But we're in 2020 now, and it still hasn't released. Could Pikmin 4 have been scrapped entirely since this announcement from Miyamoto? Well, if that was the case, they'd probably still want to go and start a development of a Pikmin game sooner or later. They could have restarted it and made a brand new project for Pikmin 4. That's why it probably wouldn't be, quote, almost done in 2015, since they would have canceled the project. But then comes the question, why would Nintendo want to cancel Pikmin 4 if it was almost done? If you notice that something wasn't that good midway through the development process like Metroid Prime 4 clearly was, then you'd restart it midway through, not when it was almost done and ready to release. You don't just realize that a project doesn't have that good of a quality once it's almost completed, you realize that relatively quickly, and then the decision comes earlier on whether or not you want to restart the project. That's why there's a lot of questions arising about the legitimacy of the Pikmin 4 statement by Miyamoto, and whether or not it's going to be releasing relatively soon. But for the Pikmin fanbase who's been waiting a long time since Pikmin 3 to get a brand new entry in the series releasing, a main entry in the series, I definitely think Pikmin 4 releasing would satisfy all of their desires. And it would really help if it released in 2020, because every year that passes from now on, we're going to be getting more and more requests from Pikmin fans for Pikmin 4 to release. So by releasing it in 2020, we're not only probably going to get a great quality of game released on the Nintendo Switch, but it's going to answer all of our questions about where was Pikmin 4. Coming in at the number 4 spot on this list is a new fighter pass for Super Smash Bros. Ultimate. And we've already received confirmation that we're going to be getting more DLC fighters for Smash Ultimate beyond the fighter pass, but we don't know the amount of characters that are going to be releasing after the fighter pass, which is why I'd like the confirmation that we're going to be getting 5 new DLC fighters released in the form of this fighter pass. Is it unrealistic to expect 5 more fighters to release? Maybe. 3 is probably more of a realistic number, and I've discussed this in depth in a previous video, so I'm not going to harp too much on it here. But if we're talking about a personal hope of mine for how many DLC fighters would release, I would definitely hope for more rather than less. Considering that the quality of the DLC fighters released so far has been very good, perhaps beyond the quality of an average fighter, factoring in the uniqueness of each new character that's come out, then I definitely would want more of this. Not only would it increase the amount of characters in Smash Ultimate's already huge roster, but it would also increase the longevity of the game and give Nintendo more things to talk about in their directs, and more reasons to make Smash Bros. Presentations. Those events are always so exciting to watch and to experience, and if we're still going to have the ability to get excited for 5 more DLC characters beyond the fighter pass that is going to be ending relatively soon, then it's just going to get me even more stoked about it. That's why confirmation of a new fighter pass is my number 4 hope for the Nintendo Switch in 2020. Coming in at the number 3 spot on this list is Nintendo 64 games and beyond being added to the Nintendo Switch Online service. Many fans have expressed that they haven't been too happy with Nintendo Switch Online. It doesn't seem to get updated very frequently with new games, and it's only NES and SNES games, when with Virtual Console on the previous Nintendo systems, we are able to get titles from, say, the N64 and other systems. That's why I would love for a Nintendo 64 update, and potentially even more consoles like Game Boy Advance, DS, and many different consoles to be added to the Nintendo Switch Online service in 2020. Now, I think expecting Nintendo 64 games to be added is a relatively realistic hope, because they added NES in the first year, they added SNES in the second year of Switch Online, so it's only natural to progress to Nintendo 64 in the third year. But I would like Nintendo to speed up the process a little bit of adding new consoles here. 1 per year is probably not going to be the best system, considering that if after Nintendo 64 you don't go straight to GameCube and instead you try to go for some of the more handheld consoles, it's going to take forever before we get to that GameCube Virtual Console hope that everybody has been wanting from the Nintendo fanbase. Perhaps a solution for this could be Nintendo adding a tiered system to Nintendo Switch Online, which I've touched on in the past, where this could be the default amount that you pay for just NES and SNES games, then you could go a tier higher and pay for stuff like N64, GBA, GameCube, and more. That could be a nice balance, because I definitely can see why Nintendo wouldn't want to add too much to this online service, considering that it's cheaper than the services that the other consoles offer, but that's no excuse for depriving fans of games that they were able to play on the Wii U Virtual Console, and now you can't play them on your modern day Nintendo console. Nintendo fans want to spend money on these games, and you're not letting them do that. It doesn't seem like the best business practice. This is why adding N64 and beyond to the Nintendo Switch Online service and improving upon it in that form is my number 3 biggest hope for the Switch in 2020. Now for the number 2 and number 1 spots on this list, for me, you could personally just realistically switch them around between one another and it wouldn't affect me too much. I'm putting this next title at the number 2 spot because I believe it's not as likely as the number 1 pick, and that's really just my tiebreaker here. My number 2 biggest hope for the Nintendo Switch in 2020 is a new 3D Mario game. We've got the confirmation of a sequel to the very first title released on the Nintendo Switch, being Breath of the Wild. But the first holiday blockbuster for the Nintendo Switch was Super Mario Odyssey, a brand new 3D Mario game. So a sequel to Mario Odyssey has to be coming, right? Well, there are many different possibilities for what the next 3D Mario game could be, and I've talked about this in depth in a previous video, so I'm not going to expand too much on it here, but there are many different routes Nintendo could go with making a new 3D Mario title. They could go the obvious route and make a Super Mario Odyssey 2, and there's definitely a lot of evidence supporting that, considering that there's many enemies who were absent from the original Super Mario Odyssey that are iconic to the Mario series and would make sense to be included in a 3D Mario title like that you could be saving for an Odyssey 2. But you could also go the route of a Sunshine 2, a Galaxy 3, many different avenues like that. All in all, a new 3D Mario game, regardless of what they decide on it to be, would be an incredible experience to have on the Nintendo Switch in 2020, and that's why it's definitely one of my biggest hopes. The route I hope they don't really go is to just port Super Mario 3D World over, and then they could say, oh, we have 2 3D Mario games on the Switch. If they make a new 3D Mario title in the style of 3D World, I would be pretty happy with that. But out of the two styles, I would definitely prefer another sandbox style Mario game like Odyssey, 64, Sunshine, something like that. So that's probably the route I would prefer them to go, but I still enjoy both styles of 3D Mario. The 3D Mario series is one of my favorite series of video games, period. And that's why I'd love to experience more of it on the Nintendo Switch. My number one hope for the Nintendo Switch in 2020, and I think it's actually more realistic than you may believe, are Pokemon Diamond and Pokemon Pearl remakes. The original Pokemon Diamond and Pearl do have many flaws with them that were fixed with their enhanced version being Pokemon Platinum, but they could also be helped with a remake of those original titles. And Pokemon's done this with previous generations. Ruby and Sapphire, they tried to improve upon some of it with Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire. The original Gold and Silver, they tried to improve upon it with Heart Gold and Soul Silver. You get it, that's what they've done in the past. And it definitely seems that now we're on track for a new Pokemon remake to happen, since we haven't had one since 2014. You also have to consider that the original Red and Blue released in 1996. They were remade in 2004, 8 years later. Pokemon Gold and Pokemon Silver were released in 2000. They were remade 10 years after that. So an 8-year gap between the Generation 1 remakes, then a 10-year gap for the Generation 2 remakes. So that's a 2-year difference right there. Ruby and Sapphire were released in 2002, were remade in 2014. That's 12 years later. Again, 2 years above the amount of time it took for Generation 2 to be remade. And Pokemon Diamond and Pokemon Pearl, you guessed it, were released in 2006. So they should be on track to be remade 14 years after. And 14 years after 2006 is 2020. This is why I believe that Diamond and Pearl remakes could definitely happen this year. And I would love for them to happen as well. The 4th generation is one of my favorites. It's absolutely an incredible experience, one of the best Pokemon experiences you could have. But there are some problems with the original Diamond and Pearl that, if fixed, could potentially make these Pokemon games some of the greatest in the entire series. These are some of my biggest hopes for the Nintendo Switch in 2020, and I strongly encourage you to leave some of your biggest hopes for the Switch in 2020 in the comment section down below. Check out some of the previous videos that I have linked for you on screen right now, and consider subscribing and clicking the bell icon to join the 20,000 of you already subscribed. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.